I like to start out that way because it brings me joy. And it's fun. And I love to hear that, and I knew this about her already, that Reverend Abigail is all about fun, because so am I. That's why I do, after the service, the Joy Factor workshop. So my title today, though, is Radical Gratitude and Entrance into the Sacred. So we're going to start out talking about regular old gratitude, and then we'll advance into radical gratitude. So how many here, by a show of hands, have something, anything in your life that you're grateful for? Anyone? Okay, it's almost unanimous. All right. I'm not convinced, though. I want to hear a little bit about that. So shout out, preferably one at a time. What are you grateful for in your life?
My mom.
My mom. Beautiful. Family.
My doggy.
Doggy.
My wife.
Wife. Breath. Life.
Song.
What? Thongs? Songs. Okay, thong.
That's a Freudian slip.
I'm grateful for thongs too. My lovely wife's thongs are fantastic. She's got some blue ones she wears on her feet. Yeah. Pets. Pets, very nice. Aren't they the best?
The best.
Yeah, we got 2 little doggies. Okay. Your husband? Which one? Oh, that one there, right? Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm convinced now, but I want to get even more excited about this. So if you're willing and able, what I invite you to do is stand up, and if you are grateful for these wonderful things in your life, what we're going to do is we're going to say yes 3 times, or scream yes 3 times as we raise our fist in the air. Ready? Yes! 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 Doesn't that feel good?
Yes!
Excellent. So you can have a seat.
Yes is for money. We're in this yes mode. Yes!
Anytime during the service, you want to throw money at us, feel free. So, it does feel good, doesn't it? Have you ever had the experience where you give a gift to someone, and maybe you didn't even think that much about it. You just thought, oh, this would be nice for this person. And so you get that gift, you give them that to the person, and they light up like the sun. Is that the greatest feeling, to be the recipient of that kind of gratitude? Doesn't it make you want to give that person more stuff because it feels so good to receive that gratitude? Well, guess what? It occurred to me that the universal presence feels the same way. Not in an emotional way, but in an energetic way. The more we say yes to our good, the more the universal presence is compelled, wants to throw more good upon us, right? And maybe you've had the opposite experience where you give a gift to someone and they kind of get a crooked smile and say, oh yeah, just what I always wanted. Want to give that person more stuff? Not so much. How many, by a show of hands, that's regular gratitude, by the way, how many, by a show of hands, have had anything, by the way, before I ask that question, but when someone gets a gift that might not look like a gift or a challenge, and they say yes to that, right? They invite it. They embrace it. Isn't that inspiring? How many, by a show of hands, have had something happen in your life in the last year that was either challenging, difficult, or painful? Anyone? Okay, now we're unanimous. I think. And that's a good thing, because that means you're human. And I always like speaking in front of humans. It's always one of my favorite gigs. Of those of you who just raised your hands, how many in retrospect, looking back, are grateful for the challenge? Most of you. So you people are crazy. Some people might say, why would anyone be grateful for something difficult, challenging, or painful? It's what? It's growthful. Good word. Stretches. So would anyone who raised your hand be willing to share what the challenging or difficult situation was or is, and why you're grateful for it? Anyone? I knew somebody would.
My mother is 91 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was the right thing to move in with her, to help her give up my home, my independence,
Mm-hmm.
and then I realized this is not at all what I wanted. And in order to be less space for her and myself, I realized this is her life.
Mm.
This is the way she wants to live it, as well as the way I want to live my life.
Mhm.
And I realized that I needed to back up and say perhaps not at this time, but maybe down the road.
Mm.
So
Beautiful.
it was really a challenge
Yeah.
and a blessing on looking back.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very nice. In the back, you had your hand up, right?
Yeah, my mother also, her death.
Mm.
I was the only child. I had no idea that the death of a parent would be so.
I know what you mean.
I now realize that even though I didn't want, she was 90, I didn't want to see her go. I wanted her to live to 100,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't going to happen. So it took me, and I'm still in process.
Yeah. How long ago?
In 2016 she passed.
Okay.
So I still have some grief, but
Yeah. It kind of goes in cycles, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So, and why are you grateful for that difficult experience? What is the greater freedom, joy, or love that has emerged from that experience for you? Mm-hmm. Just gave me chills.
that no moment is wasted.
Mm.
Every moment that you spend, every moment that I spent with my mother was significant.
Is that powerful? And you know, for me, the love that came out of the loss of my mother, which was a few years ago, is, you know, and this is when I ask the question, what is the magic, and I'm going to jumping ahead of my talk a little bit here, but what's the magic in my pain or my loss? When I get to the heart of that, the answer is always love, right? There wouldn't be any pain, there wouldn't be any loss if there wasn't love at the heart of it. And so by asking that question then, I get in touch with the love, right? So it doesn't take away the pain, but now it brings the love together with the pain. And the only way pain ever gets healed is when it comes together with love, yes? Okay. So I want to tell you a story about my journey of the magic of the soul and the writing of this book. So when I started out with the book ended up being a very different book by the time I finished it, which is true of every book I ever write, than the book that I started out to write. So start out to write about a book about the magic of the soul, how to manifest what you want in your life, right? And I felt I was pretty darn good at manifestation. At the time, I had a corporate job, making a six-figure income, wonderful marriage of 13 years. I was physically fit. I was an athlete, a tennis pro in my 20s. I was writing the book when I was 40 years old. And funny thing happened on the way to the Magic of the Soul. Everything fell apart. I became chronically ill to the point where I couldn't get out of bed for weeks at a time. My marriage of 13 years ended. The corporate job went away, all within a period of about 6 months. So it felt like everything I was identified with on a personal level, on an egoic level, was just stripped away. So I was then left to discover what was left, right? And so there was no diagnosis for 3 years. And I went the traditional route. I went to the Mayo Clinic and did all these tests. They couldn't find anything of significance. I obviously did all kinds of alternative methods, spiritual mind treatment, of course, meditation several times a day, going into alpha and theta brain waves, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, all kinds of alternative treatments. I'm, meditating, throwing lightning bolts at it, and energy healing. Nothing is changing the condition. And all the while, I'm resisting the experience, right? I'm thinking, how could this be happening to me? I'd been meditating since I was 18 years old. I'd been in this teaching since I was 24 years old. It didn't make any sense to me. And so finally, and by the way, my father died at 42, 2 years older than I was at this point in time, of cancer that hadn't been diagnosed for several years. And so I was starting to see the proverbial writing on the wall, thinking, maybe I'm coming to the end of this journey for this lifetime. And so I decided, what I did is I gave up, not in an apathetic way, but in a surrendering way. And so I decided, if I am to die from this, I am going to use the experience of dying to understand who I am as a sacred being at the deepest level possible. Guess what happened? I am standing here, so I think you know. It's the end of the story. So I started to heal. But it was not a direct line to healing. It didn't happen overnight at all. What happened is it kind of happened cyclically. What would happen is I would surrender, start to feel better, get a little bit of energy back, and then I'd go out and do something like I used to be able to do, like take a walk, and that would put me back in bed. And then I would resist because it felt so good just to have a little bit of energy left or back, right? And so then I'd resist again when that would go away. And then I'd remember, oh yeah, it was that surrendering thing that got me feeling better. So I would surrender again, and I'd get better and better at surrendering. And the part of the cycle that was the surrendering part would become longer and longer, and the resistance would become less and less. It was as though my soul had choreographed the absolute perfect scenario for me to learn how to be in a consistent state of surrender. So I ask you the question, what would life be like? What is life like in a consistent state of surrender? Take a deep breath into that. You feel some freedom in that? Yes? Yeah. Right. Open to all possibilities. It's our minds are great tools, but you're just reminding me something that comes to me so often, how much our minds limit us. The more we name things and label things and figure things out and understand things and try to control situations with our minds, the more we limit the possibilities of spirit. The more I surrender and just become an open channel, an output and an input to God, right? The more the possibilities are unlimited. Thank you for that. So, the message of the book, Transform. And by the way, as I was writing it, I stopped writing it for a while, thinking there's nothing magical about this, but I was wrong. That was the magic. And so the message became, yes, it's magical to create what we want in life. And there's a lot of that in the book too. But what's even more magical is to be grateful for what we have. And not only the things that bring us obvious happiness, but especially the moments that challenge us the most, right? And as conscious beings, don't we always look back in our life and say, oh, that time where life was most difficult, that's where I grew the most? And yet what do we do in the moment when those challenges come up? We usually resist, right? Even though we may know this. So my encouragement, the writing of this book and what that physical challenge taught me is to look for the blessing in the moment rather than in retrospect. To ask, as I say in the book, why not surrender? Why do I wait until the very crescendo of the climax of struggle to surrender? Why not surrender at the very first sign of struggle, right? And ask, what is the magic in this situation? Or what is the opportunity for growth? Or what is the sacredness that wants to unfold here? In science of mind, the way it is sometimes interpreted, and even though much less so now than it was when I was studying almost 40 years ago, first started studying science of mind, it's sometimes interpreted, if something happens that we don't like, that's a result of some wrong thinking. Anyone heard that before? So something goes wrong that you don't like, you're diagnosed with something you don't like, something financially hits you hard, and you say, okay, what was my consciousness that attracted this situation? Or even worse than that, when someone else says, so what was your consciousness that attracted the situation? What was your wrong thinking? And then you instantly feel much lighter, right? Much better. Not.
I call that RSing.
RSing people. So the better question to ask, and I asked it earlier, is what is the greater love, freedom, joy that wants to emerge from this situation? I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. So another example of this is Suzanne Somers. Everyone remembers Suzanne Somers. Maybe the younger people don't. But so Three's Company and the Thigh Master were the two things she was most famous for. But back down in Southern California where we live, several years ago we had some raging fires that swept through Malibu, and hers was one of the homes that was burned to the ground. So she's standing in front of the smoldering ashes of her home, and they're interviewing her, and they're asking her, what are you feeling right now as you're seeing the ashes of your home? And without hesitation, the words that came out of her mouth is, I know something good will come from this. Can you feel the power in that, right? And something good had to come from it. Now, something good would have come from it anyway, but she had to notice it sooner because she was expecting it. She was looking for it. She was open to that good to come out of it, right? I'm sure it challenged her as well. And by the way, I didn't think when I was 16 years old watching Three's Company I'd ever be quoting the wisdom of Suzanne Somers. Not while I was watching the show, right? From the pulpit. I didn't think I'd be a minister either. So looking for the magic in every experience. Let me read a quote from The Magic of the Soul. This is how I write about it. I'm getting teary here. When we did the meditation, that was such a beautiful meditation you did. The thing that struck me that I felt so deeply in this room, and I know it wasn't a result of just who was here in the room at that moment. I knew it was a result of the consistent sacred gatherings that you have here in this community, but I just felt such a full experience of pure love. Well, we all are, right? And I'm just feeling that right now. This is a special day for me. When I travel around, this is usually the talk that I give. And sometimes, people always love it. But I just feel like there's a sacred energy here today. And, you connected us with what's happening in London. And, and what I was feeling in that meditation is that we are also connected. And every tragedy, what's the magic in this? It's a call for love, if nothing else. That is absolutely common to every challenge In fact, everything that happens everywhere, at any moment in time, is a call for the unfolding of more love, the raising of the vibration of love. And you see, what we're doing in this center, what we're doing right now, is coming together to do that. And we're doing it really well right now, yes? Take a deep breath into raising the vibration of love. We can just feel it rise in the room as we focus on that intention, yes? When we are in the experience of appreciating the sacredness in life, we open to a world of unlimited possibilities. Because we are alert to the magic, we notice opportunities, possibilities that we might otherwise miss. Life becomes filled with a deeper level of peace and meaning as we recognize every experience is magical and know that each experience leads us to an ever-increasing expression of our soul energy. If or when we are operating from the perspective of our soul, our timeless, infinite existence, we see the larger picture. We cannot help but see the larger picture. Asking what there is to be grateful for in any circumstance, radical gratitude, moves us into the sacred perspective. It's an entrance into the sacred, yes? And this ability to see the larger picture, isn't this a prerequisite to enlightenment? Aren't our most revered and celebrated spiritual teachers and authors all saying the same thing? You know, when I used to go around and lecture about this 17 years ago, radical gratitude, I would see a lot of ahas in the audience. Yeah, hadn't thought of that before. I don't see that very often anymore. Now I just see a lot of nodding of heads, because we've all got it now, because we've heard it in so many different ways from so many different people, and we've experienced it, and we see it on the internet, you know, on Facebook every single day, messages like this. But I love to throw out some quotes. Byron Katie fans, says, love everything, and she means it. Every single experience, love. Eckhart Tolle says, give up resistance to what is. Byron Katie also says, I don't argue with reality because I'm a spiritual person. I don't argue with reality because it hurts to do so. I don't ever win that argument. It's a losing proposition. August Gold from New York wrote a book called The Prayer Chest. In it, she says, invite everything. Invite every experience. Robert Scheinfeld, in one of my favorite books called Busting Loose from the Money Game, which isn't about money, it's about consciousness, says, appreciate everything. I say look for the magic in everything. I now say, as it's evolved for me, see the beauty in everything. Because from that perspective, when we're looking at the world through the eyes of our souls, we see the beauty in everything. Even a tragedy like what happened. And I don't even know the details. I just know a tragedy happened. I don't watch the news. I haven't watched it in years. And it's so interesting. I was sitting there thinking that because I know what I need to know will come to me, right? And now with social media, we're just so much more connected than we ever were before. It's an externalization of the one mind that we have always been. And so we are connecting with those people in London. And so when we focus, as you did in that meditation, on sending out love, you know, as Michael Beckwith says, the headlines are simply prayer requests, right? And so we become connected then as part of the solution when we see it that way, rather than saying, oh no, another tragedy. And we can feel the loss in that. What's the magic in my pain? It's the love. It's the love for these people. It's the love for humanity. It's the love for evolution. It's the love for spirit unfolding. So I'll tell you about, maybe even before that, I'll say another quote from, I'll say a quote from the Buddha, because this is my favorite one. Second favorite one. And it's not, and I saw this quote in a bookstore in Canmore, Canada, and I went and looked it up to get the exact words for the quote. And I came to a page that had a picture of the Buddha, And the heading said, I didn't say that. So it was a list of all the sayings attributed to the Buddha that he didn't really say. But I like to believe he did say this, at least to one person, one of his disciples. And so the quote is, when we finally have the realization that everything is perfect, just the way it is, do this with me, we will tilt our head back and laugh at the sky. Because the tragedy is a call to love. Some people will say in some of my workshops, but what about, genocide? How could that be? How could that be? Love unfolding love, that's my phrase. If genocide can exist, as I write in The Magic of the Soul, it must exist so that we can learn from it, so that we can feel the pain of it, and rise up in consciousness to a place where it can never exist, where violence can never exist. This is the journey that we're on. It might not look like it right now, but humanity will get there, right? If we look at evolution over, a period of 10 years, we might not see a lot. But if you look over several centuries, there are things happening several centuries that cannot happen now. Even just a few centuries ago, right? Slavery used to be okay in this country. Slavery still exists, but collectively, it's not okay anymore. So Robert Scheinfeld says, I've got one more quote before I do that. Pam Grout, E cubed. Any Pam Grout fans? So she says, very similar to the Buddhist quote, when we realize that whatever's happening in this moment is the perfect thing to be happening in this moment, then we align with the field of potential. And the field of potential is all about light and love and fullness. And so when we align with the field of potential, then our possibilities are unlimited. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. So Robert Scheinfeld says, we're not creating our reality from the presence of our personal self, as we might think when we talk about creating our reality, or the law of attraction. We're creating our reality from the presence of our expanded self. Our soul, which knows that everything that happens, which is actually choreographing everything that happens for our lives, or the one soul is creating everything that's happening for everyone's life. We're all at the level of soul, we're all co-writing this script, right? And everything is perfect for every single person, right? So what that means then is if I'm not liking what I'm seeing in the world, it means I'm looking at through the limited perception of my senses, of my personal self. But when I can rise to that higher level, I see why it is good for me in the moment. And if I can't see it, I can at least know that there is a good, even if I may not understand it, and I can trust that that understanding will unfold, yes? So I'll tell you a little story about a situation that relates to this. So the Primal Fire Intensive, I've done this retreat, many different natural settings in the world. I like to call it the anti-workshop because we don't impart any information, any knowledge, any understanding, any ideology. It's all about getting out of our heads, into our bodies, connecting with Mother Earth, and just being. Everyone's encouraged to just be who you are in the moment, and magical things happen when people get that encouragement. So I was doing this, I did it 5 years in a row in Saskatchewan, Canada. And a friend of mine, a client of mine, has an equine-assisted learning facility there, which is a fancy name for a little farm with horses, but very special horses. They're horses who have been trained to help us to get in touch with our authentic self, right? And so we're getting ready preparing for the retreat, and Carol, my friend, asked me and this lovely, wonderful woman from Ireland, just the funniest woman in the world. She was a woofer. Anyone know what a woofer is? What's a woofer? Right. People who will work for free or for room and board on organic farms. And so she was one of those from Ireland, just traveling around. She actually had a PhD, but she took a break from teaching and just wanted to travel the world. So Carol asked Kate and I to go into the barn and to help her to bale some hay to clean it up. So we're baling this hay into this pit that went really deep. And apparently at one time there were pigs in the barn, and so their excrement would go, down into this pit, right? So we're baling all this hay into the pit, and then there's so much hay, we have to like compress it down. So this is funny already, huh? So anticipation. So I'm like pressing it down with my feet and putting all my weight on it, and Carol says, "Be careful, you don't want to fall in there." And so I said, "Hey, I'm an athlete, I got this." And so I'm doing this, working. And then I go to another spot where it wasn't quite so compressed. And so I went and I went down. I didn't fall all the way in, but I did kind of go from like 6'2" to 4'2" in a nanosecond, and then just like rolled back on my back, lying on the ground. So to preface what happened next, you remember the Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers, the bungling Inspector Clouseau? So the way Kate described it, she said, "So here I am baling hay with this famous author, and he just did this really, really goofy thing. And, I don't know what to say. I don't know what he's going to say." And so I stood up, I brushed myself off, I turned around, and the first thing I said was, "Every move I make is perfectly planned." And we just we laughed until our jaws were aching for 20 minutes. And that became then the mantra of the entire weekend. Anytime anyone did anything stupid, it's like, every move I make is perfectly planned. I told this story, where was it? I think it was in Cameron Park, not too far from here, right? Years ago. And a woman came up, and they had a potluck also. And she said, I was sitting there, I got myself some soup, and I was taking a sip of it, and I spilled it over my brand new white dress, and I felt my face getting hot, I felt my blood starting to boil, I was getting angry and frustrated, and then she remembered, every move I make is perfectly planned. And it just completely changed everything. So this is a spiritual practice. Peter Sellers had a spiritual practice, right? Because anytime we can laugh at ourselves, then we come in alignment with Spirit, because Spirit's all about joy and lightness. And if Scheinfeld's right, and I believe that he is, that we're choreographing our life from the presence of our expanded self, then guess what? Every move you make is perfectly planned from the level of soul. Isn't that nice how that all fit in? So let me tell you a little bit about the workshop we're doing later. And then I'll tell you a joke, and then we'll be done, almost done. So the workshop is called The Joy Factor, A Life of Unlimited Freedom. And so in it, it's interesting because I planned on this being the lightest, funnest workshop I ever did, but what I find in it is oftentimes, because of the opening exercise we do, some shadow stuff comes up, very interesting. And it comes up for a reason, because when we embrace our shadow, we're then able to embrace more joy. When we express what is in our lower unconscious and get it out into the room, into the healing circle, then we become an empty vessel that can be filled with the joy, the love, the freedom of Spirit. So, and how I define joy, by the way, is not the opposite of sadness. That's happiness. Joy, to me, how I define it for this workshop and in my life, is a pervasive spiritual quality that can be present in any moment. Can be present in the moment of loss. Can be present when we're losing a loved one, right? When my mother was passing, and she was the last 5 days of her life, she came home from a stroke to make her transition. That wasn't a happy time, but there was a soul connection that happened, right? That was profound. So that's the kind of joy that I'm talking about. And so, and one of the things, in case you can't make it to the I'll give you a little quick prelude. One of the things in the workshop that's emphasized is this is the practice, is to wake up in the morning and ask, what will bring me joy today, and go do that. Might sound impractical at this point, but if you come to the workshop, I'll show you how it becomes practical. And then I'm also going to share a technique for keeping the vibration high. We all know that our thoughts create our reality, but we forget that in times of challenge. This is a practice that I have seen absolute miracles for people. And if you can't come to the workshop, send me an email. Sign up on my mailing list, by the way, and I'll send you this information. I'll give it away for free. And so my wish would be, my prayer would be that every one of you could attend this workshop, because by the end of the 3 hours, we're going to be floating on air. We're so filled with Spirit. So if you don't have plans, please join us. You'll be glad you did. If you do have plans, change them. Very good. We're like in sync here. If you can't change them, sign up on my mailing list, and next time I'm in the area, you'll get a notification. And by the way, I don't always mention this from the pulpit, but if you check the box next to your phone number on my sign-up list, and usually, like with larger centers, I won't do this because I can't do too many, but because we're a nice intimate group, you'll get the opportunity to have a complimentary coaching session with me, which will be my joy to offer to you. And everyone in the workshop will get that offer too. So, okay. So there are these two brothers. And Bob is a cat lover. He has a cat named Perky. I used to have a cat named Perk. That's why I used that name. So he has a cat named Perky, and he absolutely loves this cat. It's the love of his life. His brother Ed is a cat hater. Can't stand cats. Bob's going away, and he thinks, okay, I got to leave my cat somewhere. I could leave my cat with Bob, or with Ed, but Ed hates cats. But on the other hand, Ed's been taking care of our elderly mother for many years. He's doing a great job with that. I guess if I can trust my mother with Ed, I ought to be able to trust my cat with Ed. So Bob leaves the cat with Ed, goes off on vacation, has a great time, comes back 2 weeks later, calls his brother up, says, hey brother, how you doing? And how's my beloved Perky doing? And Ed says, oh, I got some bad news for you, brother. Perky died. Oh, mom's calling, gotta go, click. And so Bob is just overwrought with grief, and not only in the sad news about his cat, but the really uncompassionate way in which Ed gave him the news, right? So you're smiling again. You know something good's coming, don't you? I love her. So Bob just grieves the loss of his cat, and a few days later he calls up Ed and he says, you know, Ed, I got to tell you, it really, really hurt my feelings the way you gave me the news about Perky, you know, how uncaring you were in that. And so Ed says, well, you know, I don't know what to say. Your cat's dead. I don't know how else to say it. And Bob says, well, you could have broken the news to me gently. You could have given it to me gradually. You could have said, when I called, well, Perky's up on the roof playing. And then you could have called me up and said, hey, brother, Perky fell off the roof and he hurt his leg, but, you know, we think he's going to be okay. And then when I came to pick him up, in person, you could have told me, you know, we did everything we could, but Perky didn't make it. I'm sorry, brother. And so Ed says, well, I guess you're right, brother. I could have been more compassionate. I apologize. Bob says, okay, I forgive you, brother. So, by the way, how's Mom doing? And Ed says, Mom's up on the roof playing. So sometimes we're like Bob, and we don't want to hear the bad news. We resist. So I'm going to give you a quick practice in a moment. I'll give you the practice now. So the practice is, for the next week, anytime you feel any discomfort of any kind, ask, what is the magic in this experience? What is the greater love, freedom, joy that's unfolding from this? And sometimes it can be, you know, something big that hits you. And I find sometimes those are easier, you know, to find what the magic is than some mundane thing. One time I was practicing this. The day after I gave this practice in a lecture, I stubbed my toe on the toilet in a way, you know how when you stub your toe and a shot goes right up to your head and your whole brain freezes? It was like that. And so I asked, what's the magic in this? And instantly, instantly, I went into an altered state of consciousness. And the pain was no more. Pain becomes something very different when we embrace it. Whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? So, to end, I'll tell you a quick story about, and by the way, when the magic of the soul becoming this different emphasis, I absolutely know, because I get emails from people almost every day saying this is the most transformational book I've ever read. And I know that wouldn't have happened if not for the illness, right? So it was really easy for me to look back and see the magic in it. But what it taught me is to look for the magic now. So when I was a featured speaker at Asilomar, our national conference many years ago, and it was shortly after the book had become curriculum for ICSL then, or actually Religious Science International back then. Everyone was coming up to me and thanking me for writing the book, but the biggest compliment I ever got was this one minister, a very respected minister, who said, "I want to thank you." She put her hands on my shoulders. She looked into my eyes, said, "I want to thank you for writing this book." I was in week 3 of teaching it, and I was diagnosed with cancer. And she said, if it wasn't for, and we were just studying the part of the book that was about loving ourselves no matter what, and embracing our ability, our vulnerability, the possibility for becoming ill, not judging that. She said, if it was not for that synchronicity, I would have judged myself. I would have beat myself up for the wrong thinking that created this. She said, instead, I was able to have compassion for myself, and I know without a doubt I would not have healed as quickly and as completely if not for having that compassion for myself. So, let's have compassion for ourselves. Let's have compassion for each other. Let's raise the vibration of love. We have so much to be grateful for. Yes? Yes. Yes. Thank you. I love you. Thanks for being here today. Thank you. You guys are great. All right.